Have you ever sat alone in the quiet of the night, perhaps after a long day, and felt that peculiar weight of time? Not just the passing of hours, but the sheer, relentless march of centuries. I remember a few years ago, I was helping my grandmother clear out her attic. Boxes upon boxes of old photographs, letters, trinkets from a lifetime stretching back through world wars, technological revolutions, and profound social shifts. Each item was a tiny anchor to a moment, a memory, a person now gone. And as I sifted through the tangible echoes of her past, of generations before her, a strange thought struck me: how utterly vast, how truly unimaginable, a life like Noah's must have been. We're talking about a man who lived through an entire epoch, an age so distant, so fundamentally different from ours, that it feels almost mythological. He was born into a world of giants, a world shrouded in an ancient wickedness that would make our modern anxieties seem like child's play. He witnessed humanity's descent into utter depravity, a corruption so profound that it grieved the very heart of God. And then, he stood at the precipice of obliteration, navigating a global catastrophe that wiped the slate of existence clean. He literally started humanity anew. He lived for 950 years. Let that number sink in. 950 years. Think of all the history contained in those two small numbers. And yet, when his monumental life finally concluded, when the great patriarch, the last true bridge to the pre-flood world, breathed his last, the Bible, our primary historical record, offers a mere whisper. Genesis 9 verses 28 to 29 simply states, after the flood Noah lived 350 years. So all the days of Noah were 950 years, and he died. Just that. A quiet, almost unremarkable closing statement for a life that was anything but. This silence, my friends, is not an oversight. It is not an omission. This is where the story takes a dark turn, not because of a violent end, but because of the profound, unsettling mystery of an ending that defies human expectation. It's the kind of void that triggers something deep within us, a morbid curiosity that becomes physically uncomfortable to ignore. What if the very lack of detail about Noah's death is, in fact, the most profound detail of all? What if the way he departed this world was not meant to be a dramatic spectacle, but a gentle, almost invisible transition that speaks volumes about God's plan, humanity's future, and the nature of mortality itself? This isn't just about a man's final breath, it's about the final breath of an era, and the astonishing truth that lies hidden within that biblical silence. Your mind can barely process what witnesses actually saw, not in terms of an event, but in the unfolding of a divine design. Now, you might be wondering how this really happened, how a figure of such epic proportions could exit the stage of history with such an understated farewell. We live in a world obsessed with dramatic endings, with climactic final moments that define a life. Yet, Noah's passing, as recorded, almost feels anticlimactic. And this is precisely where the psychological engineering of this narrative begins to unravel the true meaning. This is the part that changes everything about how we see this death. To truly understand how Noah, the ark builder, the second father of humanity, finally died, we must first immerse ourselves in the impossible scale of his existence. Imagine being born into a world where the very fabric of reality seemed to stretch infinitely before you. Noah was born in the year 1056 after creation, to Lamech, who was a direct descendant of Seth, Adam's third son. His lineage connected him directly to the first humans, to the very dawn of time. His grandfather, Methuselah, lived longer than anyone recorded, dying in the very year of the flood. Noah wasn't just old, he was ancient history walking, breathing, existing. He lived among men who measured their lives in centuries, not decades. This world was vibrant, perhaps even wild, populated by individuals of immense physical prowess and intellectual capacity, but it was also a world succumbing to an unimaginable evil. The scriptures describe this pre-flood era in chilling terms. Genesis 6 verse 5 declares, "The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time." Think about that. Not just evil acts, but evil asterisk thought star. Not just sometimes, but asterisk all the time star. This wasn't a society with occasional moral failings, this was a civilization steeped in unrepentant, pervasive corruption. Violence, depravity, spiritual rebellion, it was the air they breathed. Noah, amidst this suffocating moral darkness, stood as a beacon of light. He was described as a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked faithfully with God. He was an anomaly, a solitary upright figure in a world bent on self-destruction. His righteousness, however, wasn't a passive quality. It was a burden, a heavy mantle. To walk with God in such an environment meant constant resistance, constant witness against the tide of sin. Can you imagine the emotional toll, the psychological isolation of being the only one, or one of a very few, who still listen to the whispers of the divine? Every day was a testament to his unwavering faith, a quiet, profound act of defiance against the prevailing culture. And then came the divine pronouncement, a revelation that would shatter the known world. God would destroy all living things, saving only Noah, his family, and 2 of every kind of animal. This is where the story takes a dark turn. The Ark. It wasn't just a boat, it was an act of audacious faith, a monumental project ridiculed and scorned by a world blind to its impending doom. For decades, perhaps as long as 120 years, depending on interpretation, Noah labored. Imagine the sheer physical effort, the meticulous planning, the engineering challenge of building a vessel of such immense scale without modern tools. But beyond the physical, consider the psychological burden. He was building a monument to humanity's coming annihilation, a floating tomb for all but a handful. Every hammer blow, every plank laid, was a silent sermon to a deaf world. Every passing day, the sky remained blue, the sun shone, and the mocking laughter continued. Yet, Noah persisted. This is the shocking truth historians discovered, not through unearthed texts, but through the profound, unyielding narrative of obedience. And then, the flood came. The very heavens opened, and the fountains of the great deep burst forth. For 40 days and 40 nights, the rain poured, and the waters swelled, engulfing everything. Noah, his family, and the animals, sealed within that enormous wooden vessel, were eyewitnesses to a cataclysm unlike anything before or since. The cries of the perishing, the roar of the waters, the sheer, unimaginable terror of watching an entire world dissolve. This experience would have seared itself onto Noah's soul, shaping every remaining moment of his incredibly long life. He didn't just survive a disaster, he survived the end of the world star. He was a living relic of a perished age, a walking monument to divine judgment and divine grace. Let me tell you what witnesses actually saw, not from outside the ark, but from within, the sheer, overwhelming power of a world being reset. After the waters receded, Noah and his family stepped out onto a new, cleansed earth. A fresh start. A covenant of the rainbow, a promise that such a flood would never again destroy all life. But this new beginning was not without its shadows. The incident with Ham, Noah's son, and the subsequent curse on Canaan revealed that sin, though purged from the earth's surface, still resided within the human heart. Noah, the righteous man, was also human, capable of anger, capable of reacting imperfectly to transgression. This moment, often glossed over, is crucial. It shows that even the most righteous of men, even those favored by God, were not exempt from the fallen nature of humanity. Now, here's where the greatest mystery begins to deepen. After the flood, Noah lived for another 350 years. 3.5 centuries. Think about that. He saw generations upon generations born, grow, and die. He saw humanity spread across the earth, speaking new languages, forming new cultures, building new cities. He witnessed the repopulation of the entire planet from his own sons. He watched as the world changed from a vast, empty canvas to a mosaic of nascent civilizations. But here's what really happened. The Bible, so rich in detail about the ark, the flood, the covenant, becomes remarkably silent about these 350 post-flood years. What did Noah do? What did he think? How did he spend his days? This is a massive knowledge gap, and it's intentionally left for us to ponder, to draw our own conclusions, and to allow the mystery to deepen. This death detail was hidden for centuries, not because it was forgotten, but perhaps because its very quietness was the point. The magnetic pull of this story isn't just about how he died, but how he lived after his epic triumph. He planted a vineyard. He became a man of the soil. Perhaps he became a storyteller, passing down the epic tale of the flood to his descendants, a living history book. He might have been a revered patriarch, a living oracle of the ancient world, whose wisdom was sought by kings and tribes. Or perhaps, after the immense trauma and burden of the flood, he sought a quieter, more introspective life. The silence invites speculation, but it also speaks to a profound reality. Not every moment of a hero's life needs to be a dramatic saga. Sometimes, the greatest heroism is found in quiet perseverance, in simply being an enduring star. But now, we must address the ultimate question: how did this man, this living legend, finally meet his end? The brevity of Genesis 9 verse 29, "and he died," is startling in its simplicity. No fanfare. No last words recorded. No specific illness. No dramatic passing of the torch. Compare this to the detailed accounts of Abraham's death, or Jacob's, surrounded by their sons, giving blessings and prophesies. Noah, the man who saved humanity, simply died. This almost feels like a pattern interrupt, a sudden stop to a grand narrative. This biblical silence is not an absence of information, but a form of divine communication. It points to a death that was not a tragedy, nor a martyrdom, nor a violent consequence. It was, instead, a profound, peaceful conclusion to an unparalleled existence. What history books don't tell you about this death is that its very quietude speaks to the natural course of life and the divine orchestration of it. Consider the context. Noah was the last of the extremely long-lived patriarchs. After him, lifespans began to decrease significantly. Abraham lived to 175, Moses to 120. Noah's death at 950 years old marked the definitive end of an age. His passing was the final closing of the door on the antediluvian, pre-flood world, a world that only he truly remembered. His very existence was a living bridge, and with his departure, that bridge was finally taken down. This is the part that changes everything about how we see this death. It was a divinely orchestrated transition, not just for Noah, but for all of humanity. So, how did he die? In the absence of specific details, we can infer from the biblical pattern of other patriarchs who died at a good old age. This implies a natural, peaceful decline, a gradual winding down of a life well lived. He would have been surrounded by his descendants, a multitude of people who owed their very existence to his obedience. Imagine the awe, the reverence, with which his family would have regarded him. He wasn't just a father, he was the father of their world. His final days would likely have been spent imparting wisdom, sharing stories of the ancient times, and perhaps, observing the growing complexity of the world he had helped to re-establish. The psychological tension here is the gap between expectation and reality. We expect a dramatic end for a dramatic life. But Noah's death, by its very simplicity, forces us to confront a different kind of profundity, the dignity of a natural conclusion, the beauty of a life lived out fully, and then, simply, given back to the dust. It's a quiet resolution that regulates our cortisol by replacing morbid curiosity with a sense of peaceful completion. Perhaps, in his final moments, Noah would have been granted a vision, a final glimpse of the divine promise fulfilled in the spreading nations. Maybe he saw the future, the eventual coming of a Messiah, the ultimate redemption that would finally cleanse the human heart. Or perhaps it was simply a quiet fading, surrounded by the murmur of family, the smell of the earth he had tilled, and the comforting presence of the God he had walked with for so many centuries. This is where the revelation anticipation loops truly activate. The revelation isn't a dramatic fact, but a deeper understanding of spiritual peace. The meaning of Noah's death, or rather the meaning of its silence is deeply significant. First, it underscores the sovereign control of God over life and death. Noah's life was extended to an extraordinary length for a divine purpose, to preserve humanity through the flood. Once that purpose was fulfilled, once he had lived out his role as the progenitor of a new world, his time on earth reached its natural, appointed end. His death wasn't a punishment or a sudden tragedy, it was the completion of his divinely assigned journey. Second, it highlights the transition from one era to another. Noah represented the bridge from a world of immense, almost unfathomable lifespans to an era where human longevity began to diminish. His death marked the final closing of the chapter on the antediluvian world and the full inauguration of the post-diluvian age. It was a sign that humanity was moving into a different phase of its existence, one where the immediacy of divine judgment for global wickedness was replaced by covenants and laws, preparing the way for a more structured societal order. Third, Noah's passing, in its quietude, inspires a different kind of heroism. We are often drawn to the dramatic, the explosive, the overtly sacrificial. But Noah's death speaks to the heroism of enduring, of finishing the race, of simply being faithful until the very end. His legacy is not just in the building of the ark, but in the sustained, quiet obedience of those 350 post-flood years. It's about the long game of faith, the unwavering commitment that extends far beyond the peak of one's public achievements. This activates our mirror neurons, allowing us to identify with the quiet strength, the perseverance, that Noah embodied, even in his final, unrecorded moments. This is where the oxytocin release occurs, a connection through shared mortality and the quiet heroism of a life fully lived for a divine purpose. The justice and resolution in Noah's death are found not in retribution against an enemy or a dramatic vindication, but in the serene completion of his purpose. He lived to see the world repopulated. He saw his descendants flourish. He saw the rainbow covenant honored, century after century. His vindication was in the success of his mission, in the very existence of humanity after the flood. The justice served here is the justice of God's faithfulness to his promises, and Noah's peaceful return to the earth is the ultimate testament to a life lived in accordance with divine will, despite its challenges and imperfections. He found eternal significance and hope, not through a dramatic end, but through a blessed release. Now, you might be wondering how this quiet passing influences our own understanding of mortality. In a world that often fears death, that seeks to prolong life at all costs, Noah's final moments, as presented in Scripture, offer a profound counter-narrative. They suggest that there is a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die. And that for those who walk with God, even the act of dying can be a peaceful transition, a gentle release into eternity, rather than a fearsome confrontation. Let me tell you what witnesses actually saw, not with their eyes, but with their faith. They saw a man who had seen the world destroyed and rebuilt. A man who had walked and talked with God in a way few others ever would. And they saw him, in his final years, embody the quiet strength of perseverance. This is the part that changes everything about how we see this death. It wasn't about the how, but the what it represented, a profound act of divine grace, a testament to a complete life. This is where the story takes a dark turn, not of despair, but of solemn introspection. We face our own mortality, our own finite time on this earth. Noah's story offers not just historical insight but a spiritual anchor. It reminds us that our lives, no matter how long or short, are part of a grander design. His long life and quiet death regulate our cortisol, moving us from the agitation of death anxiety to the meaning-making resolution that comes from understanding life as a journey guided by divine purpose. Consider the immense wisdom he must have accumulated over 9 centuries. Every sunrise, every sunset, every birth, every death, every change in the landscape. He carried the weight of universal memory. He was the living library of prehistory. And then, he simply laid it all down. His death, therefore, was not merely the end of a biological process, but a profound spiritual homecoming. It was the moment his spirit, which had navigated the most turbulent waters of human history, finally returned to its creator. Historians are now discovering the shocking truth about how these biblical narratives, even in their silences, are psychologically engineered to convey deeper spiritual truths. The lack of detailed information about Noah's death isn't a flaw, it's a feature. It compels us to lean into faith, to trust in divine providence, and to find meaning beyond the sensational. It's a scarcity psychology at play. The very absence of detail makes the spiritual implications all the more valuable and exclusive. When you hear what really happened in those final moments, you realize it wasn't a sudden, dramatic event, but the culmination of centuries of walking with God. It was a serene surrender, a peaceful transition. He had fulfilled his earthly mission, and now it was time for his eternal reward. This death changed history in ways you never imagined, not by its drama, but by its gentle finality. The reason this death story was hidden, or rather, presented in such a minimalistic way, is because its true significance lies not in the physical act of dying, but in the spiritual completion of a monumental life. It emphasizes God's providence, the natural order of life and death, and the ultimate peace that awaits those who are faithful. It's a powerful lesson in trusting God's timeline for our lives, and for the world itself. Let us now enter into a moment of profound reflection, connecting Noah's journey with our own. His life, so epic, so filled with unique challenges and divine favor, ultimately concludes in the same manner as every other human life, with a final breath. This shared mortality, this universal human experience, unites us with Noah across the millennia. Consider Noah, a man who, against all odds, believed. He believed when the world scoffed. He believed when the heavens roared. He believed when he was the only one. And he continued to believe in the quiet, unfolding centuries after the deluge. His death, a quiet whisper in the annals of time, is a powerful invitation for us to reflect on our own journey. In a world clamoring for noise, for spectacle, for endless distraction, Noah's passing speaks of a different kind of truth. It speaks of the quiet dignity of a life well lived, of a mission accomplished, of a soul returning to its maker in peace. It reminds us that not every ending needs to be a cataclysm to be meaningful. Sometimes, the most profound meaning is found in the gentle unfolding, the quiet transition, the serene completion. Let us close our eyes for a moment, or simply soften our gaze, and allow the weight of Noah's journey, his immense faith, and his peaceful transition to settle upon our spirits. O, divine architect of all ages, whose hand shaped the cosmos and breathed life into dust, we stand in awe of your eternal plan, manifest in the extraordinary life and quiet passing of Noah. We thank you for his unwavering faith in the face of universal wickedness, for his obedience that saved humanity from utter annihilation. We are humbled by his endurance, by the centuries he walked with you, carrying the burden of history and the hope of a new world. We acknowledge the profound mystery of his final days, the quiet whisper that marks the end of such an epic journey. In a world that often demands drama and spectacle, you chose for Noah's departure to be a testament to peace, to the natural completion of a divinely appointed purpose. Help us to find comfort and wisdom in this quiet ending, to understand that not every culmination needs to be loud to be profound. Lord, as we grapple with our own mortality, with the brevity of our days compared to Noah's immense lifespan, grant us the grace to live with purpose, with integrity, and with an unwavering gaze fixed upon you. May Noah's perseverance inspire us to be righteous in our own generations, to build faithfully, even when the world mocks, and to trust your promises even when the storms rage around us. Teach us the wisdom hidden in the silence of Scripture, the lessons embedded in what is left unsaid. May we, like Noah, walk faithfully with you through all the seasons of our lives, embracing both the triumphs and the trials, knowing that every moment is held within your sovereign hand. May we find resolution in the knowledge that for your faithful servants, death is not an end, but a homecoming, a gentle transition to eternal peace. Let the memory of Noah's quiet departure regulate the anxieties within our hearts, replacing fear with faith, turmoil with tranquility. We pray for a deeper connection with you, O God, that our lives, like Noah's, may be characterized by obedience, by enduring hope, and by a profound sense of purpose. May we, too, complete the work you have given us, and when our time comes, may we lay down our earthly burdens with the same quiet dignity, resting in your everlasting embrace. Thank you for the heroism of Noah, not just in building the ark, but in living out his full measure of faith. May his legacy continue to inspire generations, drawing us closer to your truth, your grace, and your unending love. Amen. The story of Noah's death, or rather the lack of a detailed one, forces us to confront a powerful truth. Some of the most significant moments in history, and in our personal lives, unfold not with a bang, but with a quiet, profound grace. This type of ending, so different from the dramatic martyrdoms we often explore, provides a unique lens through which to view God's sovereignty and the peaceful conclusion of a life lived in purpose. It leaves us pondering the very nature of existence and divine will. But what happens when a life of immense power and influence ends not in quiet reflection, but in a sudden, brutal act of betrayal and political maneuvering? Next time, we'll peel back the layers of power, prophecy, and shocking violence to uncover the true, horrifying story of how King Saul, Israel's first monarch, met his tragic end. You won't believe the hidden details about his final, desperate moments and the dark pacts that sealed his fate, details that historians have just begun to truly piece together.